In the last few years, millions of dollars have been spent and tens of thousands of customers have been interviewed and videotaped in sales conversations to find out why some salespeople are more successful than others, why some salespeople and companies make more sales. And what we have found, and what we're going to talk about in this session, is that identifying needs accurately before you mention your product or service is absolutely essential. It is the key to successful selling. It is the most important and vital part. Because if you start talking about your product or service before you have asked enough questions and completely understand your customer's needs, and your customer is completely aware of his or her needs, if you start talking about your product or service too soon, you will kill the sale, and you'll never get a chance to make that sale. So identifying needs accurately is really, really important. Now, customers buy for their reasons, not yours. The most important thing you do in a sales presentation is to uncover the true needs or problems of the prospect that your product or service can fulfill or solve. Selling is both a science and an art. Top salespeople have a set of skills that they can use to establish higher levels of rapport and to separate prospects from suspects. By learning and practicing a series of powerful and proven skills used by high-performing salespeople everywhere, you can dramatically increase your effectiveness and your results. In this session, you will learn some of the very best ideas in identifying needs accurately that are used by the best and highest paid salespeople in every industry. The key to sales success in every situation with every customer is to ask good questions and listen closely to the answers. Remember, listening builds trust. So be a student and let the customer be a teacher. Let me ask you a question. Imagine that there's a subject that you really love. It's fascinated you for years, and you get a chance to study with the very best guru or sage or expert on this subject. And you attend small classes while this person teaches the students this particular subject that you love and enjoy. If you were in this kind of experience with this teacher, would you talk all the time? Would you babble away and talk about your life and your experiences? Or would you ask questions and listen closely to the answers? Well, your customer is the expert. Your customer is the guru on his or her situation. Your customer is the teacher who knows his or her situation, and your job is to ask them questions like a student and listen and learn from your customer. Now, problem-focused or need-focused questions uncover selling opportunities. Just like if you go to a doctor, the doctor will ask you, where does it hurt? Or where do you feel uncomfortable? Or where do you experience pain? When you're talking with a customer, that's what you're looking for as well. So practice your questions in advance. The characteristic of top salespeople is they write out and they practice their questions and they consider the wording carefully. Poor salespeople walk in and say whatever comes to mind. They ask whatever questions they think of, but top salespeople plan them very carefully. A really good exercise is for you to rehearse or role play your sales questions with your colleagues and friends and family. In other words, the more practice you have, like practicing to be in a play or a movie, the more practice you have, the more fluent you will be with the questions. Now here's a great exercise. It's called the agenda close. And with the agenda close, you prepare a list of questions that you would like to ask your prospect. You take your own business letterhead and you write the questions in large letters and you space them over the page. And I like 5 or 7 questions. Those seem to be the best. The first question is a general question. What are you doing now in this area? And then you go to more specific questions. When you meet with a customer for the first time, you say, Mr. Prospect, I've prepared an agenda for our meeting. This immediately positions you as a consultant and a professional. And you take out this sheet and give it to him or her. And you say, if I can ask you these questions or go through these questions with you, then I will have a really good idea how my company can help you achieve some of your goals. Customers love it when you come with a list of questions prepared that you want to go through with them. And as you go through the questions, the customer can make notes. Afterwards, the customer can explain your discussion with someone else. It's one of the most powerful selling techniques, the agenda close, used by the highest paid salespeople. Now, self-image plays a major role in sales effectiveness, the way you see yourself from the inside. So, see yourself as a consultant. See yourself as a knowledgeable problem solver rather than a salesperson. You are there to help the customer solve a problem or achieve a goal that they wouldn't be able to do without your product or service. In self-image, view yourself as a problem detective. Just like a detective would go out to look for cases, look for clues and information, you're a problem detective. You're a person looking for problems that your product or service can solve. Perhaps the best of all self-image improvements is for you to view yourself as a doctor of selling. This means that you are completely professional in everything you do. See, the difference between a professional person and non-professional is that they have a code of ethics. And the code of ethics requires that they always put the customer's need or the patient's needs first. So as a doctor of selling, you also have a code of ethics that you follow with every patient or with every customer. Now, in a code of ethics or a professional medical process, the doctor focuses first on a thorough examination. If you go to any doctor in the world, the first thing they will do is examine you. They'll take your pulse rate and your heart rate and your temperature and your blood pressure. Only after they've done an examination and asked you a series of questions and maybe taken blood tests, only then will they move to stage 2, which is the diagnosis. They will then say, well, based on everything that you've told me and our tests, my conclusion is that this is your situation. How does that sound? When the patient agrees that yes, that sounds like a good description, only then does the doctor give you a prescription or a course of treatment. As a doctor of selling, this is what you do. First, you do a thorough examination. Second of all, you discuss your diagnosis. And only third of all, do you present or close on your product or service and tell them the price. Now, another critical part of selling, which I love, is called gap analysis. Your ability to perform an accurate gap analysis is the key to your success at positioning your product or service. You see, the rule is that for you to sell something, there must be a gap in the customer's life or work between where they are today and where they could be if they buy and use your product or service. So if someone were to ask you, what do you do for a living? You could say, well, I'm a gap analysis specialist. In fact, you are a detective, and you are seeking problems or needs that your product or service can satisfy. You're seeking people who have a gap between where they are today and where they could be using your product or service, and you show that your product or service is the way from getting to a lower state of satisfaction to a higher state, and it is a cost-effective decision. The key to uncovering needs is always the ability to ask carefully planned questions that reveal that there is a gap between where the customer is and where they could be. Your goal is to discover a gap that you can solve with your product or service. Your job is to define the gap for the customer and then expand the gap by intensifying the need. Let me give you an example. A person says, yes, this problem causes us regular breakdowns. You say, how much does it cost if your product or service breaks down? Well, it costs this amount. What other costs? Are there costs of people not being able to work? Are there costs of lost customers because of failure to deliver? You help the customer identify that the fact that the gap or the cost is very large. Then it becomes easier and easier for you to sell your product to plug the gap. When the customer recognizes that he or she has a big problem, you suggest a satisfactory, cost-effective solution in your product or service to the customer's problem. If their solution is big enough and their problem is big enough, the sale takes place automatically. Now, sometimes you'll hear the words in selling, "I'm not interested." You'll call them up, or you'll send an email, or they'll leave a voicemail, "I'm not really interested at this time." But what does this mean? What this means is that I am not yet aware of the benefits of your product or service. In other words, the customer doesn't know what you're offering because all the customer has is your name and your company. So use this reply to any initial sales resistance that you get. "I'm not interested. I don't want it. I can't afford it. I'm happy with my existing supplier." You say these words, "That's all right. Most people in your situation weren't interested when we first spoke to them, but now they've become our best customers and they recommend us to their friends." The customer might say, "We're not in the market right now." You say, "That's all right. Most people in your situation felt that they weren't in the market when we first spoke to them, but now they've become our best customers and they recommend us to their friends." You see, customer resistance, especially at the beginning, is normal and natural. It simply means that the customer doesn't know how good your product or service can be and how helpful it can be to him or her. So be persistent, especially in getting the first meeting with the customer. It's the first meeting that starts the entire sales process. Now, most people feel that they can't afford a new product or service when they first hear about it. People always have limited funds. But remember that the ability to pay, having enough money in the customer's mind, and the willingness to pay or to part with that money are not the same thing. You see, most people are capable of paying because of credit cards and delayed payments and so on, but they don't want to. They have the ability, but they don't have the willingness. Fortunately, willingness to pay increases as customer desire increases. The more the customer wants it, the less concerned they are with the price. Now, questions are the key to sales success. Telling is not selling. The person who asks questions has control. So here are some questions that you can ask when you sit down with a prospect for the first time. First of all, what are you doing in this area right now? That's a very general question. It's open-ended, and it gives you vital information that you must have to talk about your product or service later. Here's another question. How is that working for you? Are you happy with your existing situation? Is it working well? Remember, if the customer is perfectly satisfied, they're not a good prospect. You are looking for a problem or an area of dissatisfaction in the customer's mind. Here's another question. How do you feel about your current product or service? How do you feel about your situation? When you ask a "how do you feel" question, people will almost always tell you how they feel. And what you want to hear is that "I feel a little bit irritated," or "I'm not that happy," or "I'm not satisfied." This tells you that a gap exists that you can fill with your product or service. Here's another question. What are your long-term goals in this area as it affects your product or service? Where do you plan to be in the next 3 to 5 years? You see, the very best customers are customers who think about the future. And when you ask them about their long-term goals, they visualize and they think about their future and where they would like to be. And if you can help a customer achieve the future that they want, you can make a sale. Question. What are you trying to achieve or avoid or preserve in this area? In other words, what do you use the product for? What are your goals in this particular area? Another question is, what sort of problems or frustrations are you experiencing in this area? And each time you ask this type of a question, stop and remain perfectly silent. Smile, listen, lean forward, and take notes if you possibly can. Customers love it when they see you taking notes when they give you an answer. Here's a good question. If I could show you a way to greatly improve your results in this area, would you be interested in looking at it? That's a very easy question. If I could show you a way to dramatically improve your results, would you be willing to look at it? This gives you a chance to give a sales presentation. Our final question is, would you be open to looking at something else in this area? I know you're using this product or service today. Would you be open to looking at something else that may be even better? And if they say yes, it means they're now open for your giving a presentation. Now, positive expectations when you're talking to a prospect are very powerful. So always expect to sell. Treat the customer as though the customer phoned you up and said, please come over and talk to me because after you've interviewed me, I want to buy. Imagine how you would treat a customer if they already told you that I'm going to buy your product as soon as you have interviewed me completely and I understand exactly that I need your product or service. Professional selling is not manipulation. Professional selling is a process of discovering the real needs and problems of your prospect and then showing him or her that those needs can be fulfilled with your product or service. Your ability to ask skillful questions and to listen carefully to the answers in the interviewing and identifying needs process is the true mark of the top sales professional. Now, here are some questions you can ask and answer to apply these ideas to your sales activities. Question number 1. What 3 questions would you use in preparing the agenda close? If you're going to write a series of questions from general to particular for a prospect, what questions would you want to know the answers to? Question 2. In what 3 ways could you position yourself as a consultant rather than as a salesperson? Question number 3. What 3 problems or needs does your ideal prospect have that your product or service could solve or fulfill? Question number 4. When the customer says, I'm not interested, what does he really mean? Question number 5. In what 3 ways could you increase the customer's desire to buy your product or service even before you begin presenting? Question number 6. What are 3 benefits or advantages that you gain by asking questions rather than by talking? Question number 7. List 3 gaps between where your prospect might be today and where your prospect could be if he bought and used your products or services. And finally, what 1 action are you going to take immediately as a result of what you have learned in this session on identifying customer needs accurately?